Good morning.
Good morning, Carmen.
Morning, Abby. Our reading this morning is from the book of Acts, chapter 2. I'm starting in verse 42 to the end of the passage. In the Pew Bible, if you're looking, it's page 1094. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning. My name is Clay. I am one of the members here at St. Andrew's Baptist Church. Now, I was sitting just a minute ago, and I was asked if I had the answer to Abby's question in my sermon this morning, and I turned around and said, no. As a matter of fact, all I have this morning are more questions. Now, I will add on to that. I don't just have questions, I have observations, and I have frustrations about this passage. We're in the middle of this sermon series, Joining Jesus on His Mission. And this passage can get real exciting, right? Because the very last verse we have is that the Lord was adding daily to the number those who were being saved. So the temptation would be, okay, well, let's turn this text into a formula, and if we can discover step by step how the early church did this, then the Lord will also add daily to those who are being saved. And yet, as I sat with the text, I don't think Luke is trying to give us a formula here at all. I think he's just trying to give us a descriptor of the character of this early church that people wanted to flock to. I read an article a few years ago. It was something like How to Stay Christian in College. It comes from Pew Research in the United States. One of the vocabulary differences between Americans and our cousins across the pond is that when we say college, we really mean any form of higher education, right? We don't distinguish between university and college. It's all college. So when they say how to stay Christian in college, they just mean how do you stay Christian when you leave high school and move on to the next phase of life? And there were three big correlations they found for the kids who stayed Christian in college. Number one, regular family dinners where Jesus was discussed. Number two, serving alongside their family in the church. And finally, a good youth program where teenagers are given the opportunity to explore their faith in love and fun and acceptance did not make the list. As a matter of fact, you won't find anything about teaching or programs anywhere in this article. The third predictor of whether or not a kid stayed Christian when they went to college was an adult from outside the home who took interest in and had input in the life of the teenager. Now, this is important because we could go down one route here where we do the formula and we start to evaluate everything that happens, right? As I was thinking about how have I heard this sermon handled before, I'm thinking all the way back to Bible college when there's a group of young Christian men in their 19 and 20s, and they stop right there at that first phrase. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. So we all need to become good teachers, and we need to know our Bibles well, and we need to have theological accuracy. We need to stand up every Sunday and make sure that we are speaking clearly and to the heart of everything. Then I took some Bible classes. And the thing you're supposed to look for when you read the Bible isn't what's listed first. If you see something listed, you look for repetition, right? And if you follow this and want to treat it as a list, teaching is actually the only thing that's only mentioned one time. There's four things mentioned in that first verse: the apostles' teaching, and fellowship, and breaking bread, and prayer. Now, the apostles are mentioned twice, first for their teaching and second for their signs and wonders. So we need to ask ourselves, why do we spend so much time valuing preaching and we're not expecting to see good signs and wonders if we want to stay with the importance of the apostles? But actually, what's repeated at the heart of this church community is the fact of two things, and I think it's summed up in verse 44. All believers were together and had everything in common. All the believers were together and they had everything in common. Now, this is important for a couple reasons. Now, I'm going to say something, I'm going to say it often, and I'm going to try to be very clear about this for the next however long I'm up here talking, okay? You cannot be lectured into Christ-likeness. I cannot argue you into character formation. I cannot open the Bible and convince you to become like Jesus. Now, I can prove this in several ways. First, and I've told you to do this before, and I don't know that anybody did it, go find anybody in here that works at St. Mary's, ask them if being good at the Bible ensures that you will look like Jesus. You will be met with a resounding no. Secondly, think about all the scandals we've seen in the past 5-10 years in the church. When what we value is someone who can stand up and teach really well, so we put them on pedestals, and then what happens is that leads to a lack of accountability, and then we get all sorts of abuses. If being good at the Bible, if knowing the right stuff is what does it, then why are these people always falling? And then 3, I want you to think about your own life. Think about when you were growing up and your parents used to do things that drove you absolutely crazy. And then you said, no matter what happens to me in my life, I will not repeat this thing that drives me crazy. Then you hit your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and when you answer the door, you are your parents. And everything that you said you wouldn't do, you've wound up doing. Now this gets more pointed the deeper we go. How many of you grew up in a house where gossip was the norm? Where you heard people whispering about people who weren't in the room and they were attacking character, and maybe it got couched as a prayer request, but really it was just about spreading these rumors and being involved in the gossip, and you thought, you know what, I really don't like this. And no matter what, I'm never going to participate in gossip. And yet, you hit your adulthood, and all of a sudden you find yourself participating in all these little gossip sessions. What about those of you who grew up in a home where there wasn't conflict, there was just passive aggression, right? And nothing ever got sorted out. And you think to yourself, you know what? No matter what, when I grow up, my marriage is going to be characterized by open communication and direct confrontation. And yet, here you are. And actually, the conflict is punctuated by weaponized silences and passing comments. What if you grew up in a house where somebody had a temper and it got lost all the time and your feelings got hurt and you started to internalize these narratives about yourself and you thought, you know what? No matter what, when I grow up, I'm never going to make people feel this way. And yet, you grow up and you lose your temper and you make people feel that way all the time. It's because character formation is not taught, it's caught. This is how the human brain works. Now, I checked all this work earlier this week with a budding neuroscientist named Evan Moffat, and he told me I wasn't wrong. I'm just painting with broad brushstrokes. So let me paint with those broad brushstrokes for a few moments. Before you can develop language, before you can think linearly, you can only observe. That's how you make sense of the world. And so as you're watching your parents and your siblings and your family interact with the world around you, your brain latches on and says, that's how the world works, because your world is the world. And you're taught by way of observation to react in those situations. So when you're an adult, guess what? The right side of your brain, where all this is located, lights up before you can think about it logically, and you're reacting from your character that's been wired in. Now, there's some good news there. Just like you can observe your way into character formation from your young age, you can observe your way out of into new character formation at any age. Right? I've been reading some stuff by a guy named Alan Shore out of UCLA. He's into this thing. I just like saying it because it sounds cool. Interpersonal neurobiology. Right? Doesn't that sound impressive? But the big idea is this, that our brains are wired for relationship and observation. That's the way we're formed. That's the way we're learned. And especially when we're young children, what we need to see is intergenerational interaction. Right? I need to see, if I grow up in a house with a parent who gossips, what happens to gossip outside of the house. I need to see that that's not how adults interact. I need to see that Christian adults actually shut that down when it happens. And I can start to form those associations. If I have a short temper where I'm prone to fly off the handle at the smallest slight, I need to see Christians my age and in the next several phases of life act differently. And my character can change. Here we are in this text where all people are all together having everything in common. And this is shaping who they are in such a way that people want to join into this fellowship. The Lord is adding to their number daily those who are being saved. Now, like I said, all I have is questions. And what I'm about to say is going to sound really weird coming from the youth guy and the guy who's been leading a ministry aimed at a particular age group for the last 12 years. But I got to thinking, what does discipleship actually look like? What would a community like this actually look like? Now, I've been thinking, every church I've ever known, so this isn't about any church in particular, but it's kind of about every church, focuses on two things. One, dynamic preaching on a Sunday morning. Now, I remember I was with a friend in town not too long ago, and I was wearing a baseball cap, and a guy walked up and said, "Oh, you're from the Atlanta area." And I said, "Yes." "What are you doing here?" "I work for Young Life." "Oh, I love Young Life." "Where did you grow up in Georgia?" Or I went to First Baptist Snellville. And then he was able to name my pastor at the mega church where I went, even though this guy grew up half the country away. That's where he was from. Okay, I remember sitting under this man's teaching from the age of 12 and being locked in for 40 minutes every week. This guy was really good. I can't tell you a single thing that guy said 20-something years later. That teaching didn't form me. Now, I can talk about all the life experiences I had with Max Grizzard and Kenny Anita Flowers and Joel and Jen Shimpo, and I can list a whole bunch of people who invited me to their lives, and their presence in seeing what these Christian adults lived formed me in very particular ways. More so than anything my famous pastor ever said. Now, secondly, it seems like our discipleship has been to siphon and silo people. Here's what I mean. Somebody new walks into the church, we're like, "Hey, you look like this other person, so we will siphon you into a group for that person. We'll put somebody in charge, and we'll just sort of silo you away and make sure that you're getting good teaching and peer support, really." But if we continue to do that, we have to ask ourselves, how long will that last? If teenagers are only around teenagers, what are they learning about the next phase of life? Where are they seeing young Christian adults? How can they decide to stay a Christian in university if they're not seeing how to be a Christian in university? What can university students learn if they are not seeing young adults in the next phase of life grapple with the realities of being a young adult? What about young adults and young families? How do young people learn what it means to be a young family? What about the median adults who never have a family? We start to ask a really insidious question. What do we do about people that don't fit into these silos? And we undercut the very idea of having everything in common, because what we should be asking is, what do those people have to teach us about life? They have had fundamentally different experiences in their walk with Jesus than I have. They have something I can't experience. So how do I get alongside them and watch them be faithful to Jesus in a way that I may or may not find myself some way and be shaped by them? Everything, everyone together, everything in common. Like I said, I only have questions. I only have frustrations. I don't have any good answers, but I started to ask myself, what if? What if a community looked like this? Where it wasn't about, hey, let's all come together on Sunday, but then meet in our little affinity groups. But what if it was, we're always coming together? I remember talking to our tour guide when we visited Israel a couple years back. And this is sort of reflected in the Highlands. This used to happen to Angus on Orkney. He would tell us this all the time. Actually, his granddaughters told me about this because it drove them a little nuts. Anyway, neither here nor there. But what he would say is he married a Western woman. This is Andre, our tour guide in Israel. And he had to leave the old city. Because in the West, what we value most is our autonomy and our privacy. Don't infringe on that. But in the East and in the ancient world, that really wasn't a thing. And even to this day, his American wife would be upset when they would just be on the couch watching a movie at 9 p.m. and their neighbor just felt free to open the door and walk in and sit down and watch the movie with them without saying a word. Or if she was cooking and the neighbors smelled it and they just came over and they're like, this smells great, and assumed that they could stay for dinner. Right? I was told, Angus has said this to me several times, just come to my house and come in, because apparently on Orkney, that's what you do. Just come over and come in. We're expecting you. We want to be here with you. I was with friends a couple days ago, and I said, we should do this more often. And my friend said, just come and knock on my door. Come over. What if we opened ourselves to that form of life? Where we were always together, having all things in common, where I could see the next phase of life, where I could model a phase of life to those who are behind me, where I could learn from people who are totally different from me. It's a good question. I don't have a good answer. Ultimately, the question I'm left pondering after having sat with this for all week and just being frustrated time and time again was, if we are going to be a church that has something for everyone, are we sacrificing our ability to be a church that can be everything for anyone? I don't know. I don't have answers. I don't even have a good song to follow this sermon up. Rather, what I would do is I would like to sit in silence for a few moments and invite the Holy Spirit and ask Him, how would He lead us to be this type of people? A community that is so attractive, that is so different, that people say, I've got to be in there and be a part of whatever that is. How do we do it? Let's take a few moments and ask Jesus. Lord, where we're strong, make us stronger. Where we need to change, lead. Where we need to trim, give us grace. Give us eyes and ears and hearts for the people outside of our silos. Make us a group of people who are everything to each other. who are together and have all things in common. Amen. Now David is going to come. David Harrison, where is he? David Harrison? Oh, right, he's downstairs. He's coming up. Should we spend a few more moments in silence? We'll do that when David arrives. He'll lead us in prayer.